Ladies and gentlemen, when the candle is down to its last flicker, many believe the light is gone. But let me tell you something powerful today. It's often in your darkest hour that God begins His brightest work. Dark moments are often understood as final chapters, as if the presence of pain, silence, or failure signals that life has reached a dead end. But in reality, these seasons are not conclusions. They are transitions. When we find ourselves in darkness, it can feel suffocating. The job is gone, the relationship ends, the dream collapses, and suddenly everything familiar fades into shadows. It's easy to assume that God has stopped listening or that His plans have failed. But what feels like abandonment is often a sacred setup. Darkness in life is not a sign of divine absence, but a sign of divine preparation. Just like a seed must be buried in darkness before it breaks through the ground, we too must sometimes pass through seasons where everything seems hidden in order to grow. Many of life's most significant transformations begin in the dark. Think about it: the womb, the soil, the night sky. These are all dark places where life is formed, nurtured, and launched. In the same way, our spiritual breakthroughs often begin when we are stripped of our control and certainty. When we cannot see the way forward, we begin to rely on something greater than ourselves. That space of dependence, of not knowing what's next, is often the very place where God's hand is most active. He is not punishing in those moments. He is pruning. He is not hiding from you. He is working through you. It's natural to want clarity, light, and resolution. But growth is rarely comfortable, and the path to purpose is almost never paved with ease. The darkest valleys teach us the most. They humble us, refine us, and shift our focus from what we can achieve to what only God can do. And when the light finally breaks through, when the job comes, when the door opens, when the healing arrives, it's not just a victory. It's a reminder that the darkness was never the end. It was part of the process. We must remember that emotion is not evidence. Just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean you are. Just because you feel doesn't mean you've lost your purpose. Feelings fluctuate, but remains. And the truth is, God never wastes pain. He never writes a story that ends in despair without using that chapter to bring transformation. What you're walking through might feel like a breakdown, but it could be the first stage of a breakthrough. What looks like a closing scene could be the setting for a new beginning. Some of the most beautiful miracles emerge from seasons of complete stillness and darkness, not because of the absence of activity, but because of the presence of divine work that eyes cannot yet see. Silence is often misinterpreted as absence, especially when we are desperate for answers, direction, or intervention. In the human experience, we tend to associate silence with being ignored, forgotten, or overlooked. When prayers go unanswered, when no signs appear, and when life remains still despite our effort, it's easy to assume that God is distant or uninterested. But that assumption is a misunderstanding of how divine timing and presence work. Silence, in many cases, is not a sign that nothing is happening. It's a signal that something is happening. Just not in a way we can hear, see, or understand yet. God often works in silence because stillness allows deeper things to unfold. Just as seeds grow beneath the surface before ever breaking through the soil, a spiritual development often takes place in unseen spaces. It is in the quiet where strength is forged, patience is deepened, and faith is refined. When everything is loud, we tend to react. But when everything is quiet, we are invited to reflect, to listen differently, and to grow. Silence creates space not just for answers, but for awareness. In those silent seasons, we begin to ask better questions. Not just, why is this happening? What is this teaching me? Not just, where is God? But how is God shaping me through this? Many people in Scripture experienced long seasons of silence before their breakthrough. Joseph sat in prison for years, forgotten by people but never by God. Moses spent decades in the wilderness before he heard the call of the burning bush. Even Jesus endured moments of silence from heaven before his resurrection. These delays were not detours. They were preparations. And the same is true for us. When God is silent, it is not because He has left. It is because He is preparing the path or preparing us for what lies ahead. Silence is not a rejection. It is a holding pattern, one that requires trust, humility, and spiritual maturity. Often, the silence challenges our desire for control. We want clarity, but God gives trust. We want speed, but God moves in purpose. It is in this friction that we either give up or grow up. Those who wait well, those who remain faithful even when they hear nothing, experience a deeper level of peace, strength, and alignment with divine timing. Silence asks us to believe in what we cannot see and to trust in what we do not hear. It tests our faith, not to destroy it, but to strengthen it. When you feel surrounded by silence, remember that heaven is not asleep. What feels like a pause is often a process. What feels like distance is often divine nearness operating in ways your senses cannot detect. Silence is not empty. It is filled with movement, just beyond your awareness. And one day, when the time is right, the silence will break, not with noise, but with purpose, direction, and breakthrough that proves God was present all along. There are moments in life when everything we've relied on, our plans, our strength, our resources, falls apart. In these moments, we're left with a hollow ache, a space where certainty once lived. We call it emptiness, and it often feels unbearable. But that emptiness is not meaningless. In fact, it may be one of the most powerful spiritual spaces we ever encounter. Emptiness is not a sign that we've failed. It's a sign that we've come to the end of ourselves. And that's exactly where divine intervention begins. When we're full of our own agendas, our own logic, and our own control, there's no room for something greater to enter. But when all of that is stripped away, we become open vessels, ready to be filled with wisdom, strength, and guidance that doesn't come us, but from God. Life has a way of humbling even the most prepared person, no matter how organized, educated, or strategic we are. We eventually face a situation that we cannot fix with our own hands. And when we do, it's tempting to panic, to feel as though we've failed. But sometimes what looks like failure is actually a sacred invitation. God often waits until we're emptied of pride, self-reliance, and stubbornness to move in a way that can't be mistaken for coincidence or chance. His timing doesn't align with our deadlines, and His ways don't always make sense to our limited understanding. But they are always purposeful. And the emptiness we dread is often the space He chooses to work in most powerfully. Throughout history and Scripture, we see examples of people who had to be emptied before they could be filled. The widow who had only a little oil left was able to witness a miracle when she surrendered what little she had. The disciples had fished all night and caught nothing until Jesus told them to cast their nets again. The pattern is clear. Divine intervention often follows a moment of total surrender. When we reach the end of ourselves, that's when God steps in with provision, breakthrough, and clarity that only He can provide. Emptiness removes the illusion that we are in control. It reminds us that we are human, limited, fragile, and in need of something greater. And that awareness, painful as it places us in the perfect posture for transformation. In our emptiness, we are teachable. In our emptiness, we are humble. In our emptiness, we stop demanding and start listening. And in that space, God speaks. Not always with immediate solutions, but with deep peace, renewed strength, and the next step we need. We begin to experience grace in a way that goes beyond logic, because we know we did not earn it. It came not from striving, but from surrender. The emptiness that once felt like a curse begins to reveal itself as a gift, because it cleared the space where heaven could touch earth in our lives. There is often a deep frustration that comes when life feels stagnant, when, despite our prayers and efforts, nothing seems to be changing. It can feel as though time is slipping away, doors are staying closed, and the heavens are silent. But this perception misses a critical truth. God does not always work in visible ways. Much of His greatest work happens beneath the surface, beyond what our eyes can see or our minds can grasp. Just because you cannot see movement does not mean there is no progress. God's ways are intricate and intentional, and often the most significant breakthroughs begin long before there are any outward signs. In nature, the most dramatic transformations begin underground. A seed, when planted, disappears from view. It looks lifeless, buried in the dirt. But inside, a powerful process has begun. Roots are forming, stability is being established, and the conditions for life are being created. The surface remains unchanged for a time, but deep down, growth is in motion. The same is true in our lives. There are seasons when it looks like nothing is happening, but beneath that stillness, God is positioning people, aligning opportunities, healing wounds, and preparing our hearts. When He finally reveals what He's been building, it often comes suddenly. But that sudden shift was preceded by quiet, patient, unseen work. Many people give up too early because they don't see the evidence they're looking for. They expect miracles to come with noise, with signs, with instant results. But God is not bound by human expectations or timelines. He often chooses the hidden path so that we learn to walk by faith, not by sight. He allows the invisible process to refine our character, deepen our trust, and humble our perspective. What is being delayed is not being denied. It is being developed. It's not that God is ignoring you. It's that He is doing something deeper, something better than what you're asking for. Even in the waiting, there is purpose. Even in the quiet, there is preparation. What may feel like a pause in your story could actually be the chapter where everything is shifting into place. Think about the foundation of a building. Before the walls rise, before anything impressive is visible, the groundwork must be laid. If that foundation is rushed or ignored, the structure cannot last. Likewise, God builds from the inside out. He forms the internal before the external. He prepares the root before the fruit. If you're in a season where you feel forgotten or overlooked, remember that the soil is not the end. It's the beginning. Just because you don't see the breakthrough yet doesn't mean it isn't already in motion. What's coming is often so significant that it requires time to build properly. Trust the silence, trust the stillness, and trust the hidden work of God. He is never idle, even when life feels still. He is shaping your future, maturing your faith, and orchestrating answers that will one day leave you in awe. There are moments in life that hit so hard, they make us question everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about others, and even about God. Pain has a way of making time stand still, of magnifying a single chapter until it feels like the whole story. When we walk through betrayal, loss, failure, or heartbreak, it becomes easy to forget that life moves forward, that there is more to be written. But one painful chapter, no matter how dark, does not cancel the beauty of the entire book. Just like a storm doesn't erase the existence of the sky, a season of pain doesn't eliminate the possibility of healing, joy, or purpose. Painful chapters come uninvited. Sometimes they are the result of choices we've made, and other times they come from circumstances far beyond our control. Either way, they can leave scars that feel permanent. But scars are not the end. They are signs of survival, not defeat. They speak of battles faced and strength found in places we never expected. The presence of pain in your story is not a mark of shame, it's a mark of movement. It means you've lived, you've stretched, you've felt things are human. And most importantly, it means you still have more story to live. Often in the moment of suffering, we can't see the bigger picture. It's like reading a book and stopping at the worst page, assuming that's how it ends. But if you closed the book too soon, you'd never know about the comeback, the healing, the redemption. You'd never discover that what seemed like a disaster became the very soil where strength, compassion, and wisdom were born. Some of the most powerful stories in history include chapters of loss, failure, and devastation. What makes them inspiring is not the pain itself, but the decision to keep going in spite of it. God never promised a life free from hardship, but He did promise that He would walk with us through it and use even the worst moments for something greater. Painful chapters can become pivotal ones, shaping character, deepening empathy, and opening new doors we never saw coming. What once looked like breaking point often becomes the turning point. When you look back later, the very chapter you wanted to skip might be the one that gave your story its depth and power. It's easy to let one chapter redefine how we see ourselves. We label ourselves by our mistakes, our trauma, our weakest moments. But our identity is not found in a single season. We are more than our pain. The story is still unfolding, and even though one part may be hard to revisit, it does not dictate how the next part will be written. Growth, love, and purpose are still ahead. Redemption is still possible. The pen is still in God's hand, and He is not finished. There is something profoundly humbling about reaching a point in life where everything seems uncertain. You try, you pray, you hope, and yet nothing seems to change. You look around, and it feels like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in a season of waiting, confusion, or silence. It's in those moments when your strength is drained and your expectations have quietly faded that God often chooses to move. Divine surprises don't come when we have everything figured out. They arrive when we least expect them, when we've stopped trying to force outcomes and have surrendered the outcome entirely. It is in that space of surrender and stillness that something sacred begins to unfold. God is not restricted by time, logic, or our understanding of how things should unfold. What seems late to us is often right, on time, in His divine plan. His ways are higher and often hidden until the right moment arrives. When we stop looking for answers in our own strength and open ourselves to something bigger than us, that's when the unexpected happens. An opportunity shows up out of nowhere. A conversation changes everything. A door you forgot you knocked on finally opens. And you realize that while you were worrying, God was working behind the scenes, orchestrating details you didn't even know mattered. There is power in divine surprise because it reminds us who is really in control. We can plan, prepare, and position ourselves, but ultimately it is God who directs the outcome. And when His timing collides with our lives, it creates moments that no one else can take credit for. These moments are filled with awe because they carry a clarity that this wasn't coincidence, providence. It wasn't random. It was orchestrated. It wasn't earned. It was grace. Divine surprises often come when we feel most unworthy or unprepared. They catch us off guard, not to confuse us, but to remind us that God doesn't need our perfection, only our willingness. He doesn't need us to have all the answers, just the faith to keep walking. Often, the very thing we thought was over, the relationship, the calling, the dream, is the area God breathes new life into. And because it was unexpected, it becomes even more powerful. We recognize that the blessing came not from striving, but from trusting. These divine moments are not just answers to prayer, they are reminders of God's nearness, His attention to detail, and His deep love for us. They recalibrate our faith, shift our perspective, and ignite hope where we thought it was gone. What you thought was a seasonance may actually be a setup for something greater, much better ahead. What you thought was failure might turn out to be the path to your greatest breakthrough. And when it happens, when the unexpected unfolds, you'll see that God never forgot you. He was simply preparing the right moment to surprise you with something far better than you imagined.